Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Factory Must Grow, episode 44. Joining us on the line today is Galdoc. How are you doing today, Galdoc?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Always good to hang out with you. As usual, today on the podcast, we'll start with a mod spotlight and then we'll dig into our main topic. Today is all about what it's like to mod Factorio. Kind of Galdoc leading the charge, talking about a lot of his modding experience. I'll have some things to add and some things to question. But as usual, I want to thank the show's patrons first. This show is possible because of you, the listeners. If you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax. I will say you can also head over to Galdoc's Patreon and support him as well, because he's now the co-host of this podcast. And there's not a specific Patreon for the podcast, because just in general, the support the listener viewer count level hasn't grown enough for that to make sense. But that being said, please support Galdoc as well. If you're to support the podcast, and this is more complicated for you. So you're the consumer, you get to do whatever you want, and you should do whatever you want. That's your job with your entertainment money. Don't let people tell you what to do with your entertainment money. That being said, if you're going to support the podcast, I'd ask that you support Galdoc and I equally separately on our Patreons rather than just Krydax. Anyway, but some people are joining for Pyanodons. I can't know why people are joining unless you send me a message on Patreon. Anyway, that's all yours to figure out if you'd like to support me/us/Galdoc.
And I'll just point out that the Pyanodons playthrough you're doing is worthy. Like, it's fun. I have watched a little of it.
Yeah.
I usually get intimidated. And I'm like, that's a lot. And then I quietly close it. And
it's nerd snipe territory is what I was just talking about before we started the cast. Maybe I'll have a moment to talk about that later. But our mod spotlight for today is another really small one, and this one's kind of a weird one because it's officially listed as deprecated, but it still works. So I think it's worth using, unless someone knows about bugs with it that I don't know about. It's still working. It's called Ghosts Do Not Kick You Out of Their GUI, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It was made by Quezler about a year ago. It only has 800 downloads, probably because it says it's deprecated. I'm not sure if it says that just because the mod maker gave up on making mods, or
no, Quezler's still around.
Okay, well then I don't know why it says it's deprecated, because it works. And essentially what it does is it will pause if you're in a GUI. For those who don't know, let's talk about the problem first. For those who don't know the problem, in Space Age, you use remote view a lot. And even in Factorio 2.0, you use remote view more, because remote view has been improved in a lot of ways from kind of the old Factorio. So now when you place a blueprint for something, you can actually modify like the GUI selections. Like you can set a recipe in an assembler, or you can plop down a decider combinator and start working on the conditions for it. But now that you've placed a ghost, a construction bot is like, hey, I'm going to go build that thing that you said you wanted me to build. And so it'll start flying over there with the object. And then the problem is, if you're modifying your GUI selections and then the bot plops the thing down, it just kicks you out and deletes everything you did. Or does it save your progress but kick you out? I actually don't remember.
I don't really answer that, but yeah, it does at least close it, I think.
Either way, it's horribly annoying. It's one of the biggest faux pas in game design, is to like kick players out of menus with zero like reason, and they could literally be in the middle of typing or clicking something and it just full kicks them out. Like, that's always a bad thing in any game for any reason, and it's so jarring. And so in this mod, what it does is it just has construction bots wait. If you've got the GUI open, the construction bot will just sit there waiting until you close the GUI, and then it'll build the thing, which is so much better. In my opinion, it should be in the base game, but anyway.
You mean I have yet another way of being a pest to my own bots as I actively interfere with the tasks I've given them? That's great.
I mean, they live to serve you, so it's only fair. But yes, yeah. I don't honestly understand how Space Age doesn't have a fix for this particular issue, because it's a pretty obnoxious one, and a lot of people complained about it in the beta. I do know it's really hard to fix. That's why it wasn't fixed quickly or easily in some fashion. But I think a slightly janky solution like this is actually better. I think not having the player get kicked out of the GUI is better than the bot building it slightly sooner. I like
Yeah.
in my mind, that's actually a trade-off that most players that I can imagine would want to say yes to. So maybe it's still too janky for them to implement this on an official level, and that's why they didn't try it this way. But it just feels odd to me that Wooba didn't like have some sort of official, even if it was a slightly janky solution to this problem, because I think the cost is higher.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I will be giving a partial answer to the question you've posed there a
Ooh,
little later on in today's
fun,
episode. It's not a
fun.
direct answer, and
Sure.
it's a little bit, reading the tea leaves, but I'll try to fill in the blank as best I can on that. And also, I can fill in the blank on why Quezler. I don't know why he deprecated it, but Quezler has tons of mods out there, and they are very small. They usually do some really tiny thing. And just because in case Quezler ever watches this, I just want to say big eye emoji react. And this is something that will make no sense to anyone unless they've ever interacted with him online,
Got
because
it.
he does that react to everything.
Got it.
And it's like clockwork. It's great.
All right. Well, in
So
that
now
case,
I've
yes,
immortalized this
you've
behavior on
immortalized this. Yes. All right. Well, let's move
Code
on to
Green knows.
talk about modding in general. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of like different things that modding interacts with in the Factorio engine, what it can't interact with, what's difficult to interact with, what's difficult to make performant versus not, what's easy versus not. For those of you that haven't ever written a Factorio mod but are interested in it, this is going to be a great podcast for you. And I will start with kind of giving you a smidge about my perspective, because Galdoc's going to do a lot of the explaining here. But for me, I've done a tiny bit of modding. And what I will say is if you want to mod well, the harder part about getting started is actually setting up all of your environments. Like I wanted to use VS Code, for example, and I wanted to get that hooked up to a GitHub repository. And I wanted to, there's a VS Code extension that packages Factorio mods for you, which is really nice. And you'll want to get that. So like that, doing all that is actually really intimidating. But just know you don't have to do all that. What you can do is write a text file. And I mean, I would recommend at least downloading Notepad++ instead of using Microsoft's Notepad or whatever, because that alone is a big improvement and it's very easy to download. But you don't even have to do that. You can just write a text file and you can zip it. And you have to do, there's a couple other minimum requirements that are explained on like the mod page. And we'll talk more about this, but you can get lots of help on the Factorio modding Discord as well to just do the bare minimum. Like you could make a super simple mod that changes steel plates to cost 2 iron instead of 5 iron, for example. And that mod would only take you a couple minutes to write, even if you've never written a mod before. So I recommend don't get intimidated by all those things. If you want to dive in and kind of do it that way, you can, but just ask for help and people will be happy to help you. But this podcast isn't going to be mostly about how to get started. So those pieces, if you're interested in that, like there's lots of resources out there and there's lots of people out there. But this is going to be a little bit more about once you've gotten started, here are some of the things to expect or think about or know about modding in Factorio. So,
Yes.
Where do we want to start, Galdoc?
Well, can I make contact with what you just said there, actually?
Please do.
So you like I used to use Notepad++ all the time, and the only reason I stopped is because VS Code was just more comfortable, but I still have it installed on my system, and I still, for certain tasks, will just use it. And so, yes, it is good. I will say that you're right. I actually am reminded of when I made a one-line mod for Bold Viking to make a building, and I don't remember which one it was, in Pyanodons, rotatable in a certain way. And the mod had like I say it's one line. There are a few things that need to go into a mod, and a little bit of it is boilerplate, just so that the Factorio engine knows that the thing that it's reading is a mod, etc.
By the way, boilerplate is a vocab word that gets used a lot in the computery world. It's basically just what's a synonym for
It's
boilerplate.
repetitive code that you don't really have to think about. You basically it's kind of like the cumbersome rituals you have to go through in order to achieve the goal you're doing.
It's something you could copy paste from the internet and change it to insert your, it's like a Mad Lib, like insert your name here, insert version number here, insert date here. But like there's a lot of other words in there that are copy pasted.
It's like an AI resume prompt writer. So when you send the
Exactly.
resume
Yeah.
out, you don't want it to have insert name here.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
Anyways,
there's a lot of things like
um,
that that are easy to do.
but yeah, so the idea is that while you can make it that simple, there are, as you said earlier, I really want to touch on the fact that the community is there. I found it very straightforward is the wrong word, but like I was able to ask questions and get spun up on it if you are interested in it. The add-on for VS Code that you were mentioning earlier is called Factorio Maker's Toolkit. It's coded and maintained by Jarg, just a random geek. They do this sort of in their own free time. And yeah, I have my Discord is also a great place to go to get questions answered. But the Factorio Discord is far and away the best place to go. So, but anyways, what I'm more looking at to talk about today is basically there are some expectations people have when they play Factorio. And they want to mod. They say there's this thing I'd like to be in the game, and typically what they do is they play the game for a while and something is frustrating them or annoying them, or basically just is unfun, or maybe it's a pain point for some reason. Other times, they just want a new experience. They've played Factorio, and though there might be other things they could do, there are other things they want to do. So maybe they don't want to necessarily get all the achievements or speedrun it, and instead want to just try a new experience and get that thrill of launching a rocket for the first time again. And in these cases, people tend to reach to mods and sort of put together some collection of these things. But the behind the scenes, what goes on behind the scenes in modding, can understanding that better can actually help you understand like what to kind of expect. So this is sort of going to be said from the perspective of a mod enjoyer, who says, I want to play these mods, and what can I expect there to do, and what should I not expect them to be able to do. And from the modding perspective of, I have an idea, I'd like to craft something so that other people can have this experience I want to make for them. So the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we are working with the Factorio engine. The Factorio engine was coded in C++. We do not have access to it. There is a sort of notion, it's heard it through the grapevine. Maybe someday, possibly, it'll be open sourced. I have no expectation that it ever will be. But that's okay, actually, because there's a lot you can do with the engine. And in fact, when they built it with modding in mind. It's like from the ground up. They absolutely wanted people to make mods for it, and this was part of their ingenious plan for making the game popular. They made a game that sort of entices and rewards people who are of an engineering bent to come play and then to make content for them. It's great. And all they have to do is maintain a community that helps answer questions and a wiki that has all the API documentation in it. So the thing is that this engine is not always happy to facilitate all sorts of things. There are some things you're just not going to be able to do. Like, I'm sorry, if you want to do a Street Fighter 2 / French cooking simulator where you have JRPG elements, then it's probably not, you can probably get some of those in there. But maybe Elden Ring might be a bit beyond the Factorio engine. Just throwing that out there. And so some things will make the engine very happy, and it will easily crank out whatever it is you're trying to make. And that's essentially where we're going to start. If you want to make a thing, whether that be an item, which is something in your inventory, obviously, or an entity, which is something you place on the ground, or a recipe, which is obviously exactly that. You have to stitch together elements of a recipe, ingredients and stuff. Technologies that unlock those sorts of things. These all fall under the category of what are called prototypes. That is to say, a prototype is so there's a recipe prototype, there's a technology prototype, there is an entity prototype. And what it means is that you can say, I want to make this particular type of thing. And all I have to do is look at the language they've asked me to use in the API and fill in the properties. And voila, the game will just make this thing occur. So if you want to make a tin plate, all you have to do is create a new item. And this item needs to have an icon. It should have an icon. just as a note, there are some things that must be in every property, but there are some things that it doesn't, like most of it's optional. You don't have to include most of it. It just might be a weird experience if, say, your iron plate or your tin plate didn't have a name. Like you can do that, like not give it a locale. It's not going to be good. People are going to complain. They're like, what is this, um, untitled, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, but as long as you fill in enough of these things, then you're good. You fill in an icon, you fill in a name, you fill in a stack size. You don't even have to give a recipe for these items. There are recipes in the game right now items in the game right now that do not have a recipe. And so what this stage looks like is essentially taking all of those concepts and putting them together, linking them together such that the player gets the idea of something existing. So, for example, if I'm going to make, let's say, an electroplater, which seems to be in every single mod ever, including my own, then you're going to need an item to be the electroplater that is in the inventory, which is a separate prototype from the entity, which is the thing that's on the ground. Although they are linked, they're linked by, if you use the item, its placeable result or whatever is the electroplater. If you mine the electroplater and pick it up, the dropped result or whatever it's called, I forget the name of the prototype, is the electroplater item. There's going to be a recipe to make it. There's going to be a recipe category that it can craft because it's a crafting entity. There's going to be a technology that unlocks being able to have the recipe to make it in the first place. And there's a couple of other things, item categories and stuff, that essentially are going to be built around this one thing so that when the player plays the game, there's a thing, there's an electroplater. All they have to do is bang on some steel plates and chemicals, and then boom, they get the thing, right? They don't know that behind the scenes, you had to go through and make all these prototypes. But this is the thing the engine is very good at. So all you really have to do is have a clear enough vision of what it is you want to make, and all of a sudden you can just type words on a screen and you get these things.
Right. And just a small interjection, like that's why there's a lot of minor content mods that add new recipes, new buildings, new items, new technologies, because those are simple to add. And by simple, I don't mean like to, denigrate the people who do that like they didn't work hard for it. Like new sprites are hard to make, right? But it is what the game's already doing a lot of, and adding more of it doing more of the same thing is not hard for the game, and it's not too hard on the modding end. It's very easily supported. And I want to add, I don't remember if this was something you were planning to talk about later, but as someone who is, if you're newer to modding, a great way to look into prototypes is Control-Shift-F while you're playing the game. When you're playing the game, you can highlight something with the mouse, hit Control-Shift-F, and it will bring up the Prototype Explorer. I use this a lot in my modded playthroughs to find out details about items, about recipes, mostly about entities and items that aren't told to you in the tooltips. So like a train has a braking force. Well, if you have modded locomotives, they don't tell you the braking force on the tooltip. So if you want to know the braking force, you either have to go into the mod files on your computer, like, in the zip file, or you can just Control-Shift-F on the modded train, and then there you can see all of the details of the prototype that have been defined in the mod, and you can see its braking force. So if you're wanting to look into like what numbers exist on certain things and what's tweaking what, the Prototype Explorer while you're playing Factorio is quite useful for that, and I use that a lot to see details about things.
That is one great way of doing it. There's also Control-Shift-E, which brings up the whole list, and then you can just type in the names, and it sorts it by prototype, and you can look up like whatever the train is, and you can see the entity, the item, etc. So I would also suggest doing that over going into the mod's guts and trying to tinker with stuff. You're less likely to break stuff. I'm not saying everyone's going to, but like sometimes you may. But also, it may be that the property you're looking for was not explicitly defined. As I mentioned earlier, they're all optional. I say all, they're mostly optional properties, and braking force may be one of them. What you would, if you didn't see it, then have to do, like you do have to sometimes traipse about in the code to see where it gets defined, because sometimes you'll create the entity over here, and then you'll change the characteristics here, change the characteristics here, and so on and so forth. And then at the end of the day, you're not quite sure what the braking force is, but using the Prototype Explorer is better because that just shows you the end result, and you don't have to care about any of that code stuff. You don't have to like traverse whatever the thought process was that the coder was having at the time. So that's a good piece of advice. But there are, and I do want to say, like, I built most of Galdoc's manufacturing on that. Almost all of Galdoc's manufacturing is just very complicated and procedural ways of generating prototypes. So I do have a little bit of experience on that one because holy mackerel, I made it as complicated as possible. Oh my god. Anyways, so essentially there are some challenges with this still. Like even though the engine is quite happy to do these things, um, you are going to have to live in a not vacuum. That is to say, there are other mods that do similar things. Like I said earlier, a lot of mods have an electroplater. What do you do when you, excuse me, when someone tries to play your electroplating adding mod with another mod that already has one in there? Well, now you have to think about that. And this is not always easy. I've talked with devs who have even just something as simple as the same material in one mod and the other, like with a mod pack they were trying to be compatible with. This does create a problem. And so now you have to start thinking about things like load order, a little bit beyond the scope to go too deep into that, but suffice it to say that you can essentially be aware of when you're making your mod, what other mods are loaded and react. You can say, I'm not compatible. You can say, I am compatible, but they go first, or I go first, sort of. I'm slightly misstating that, but I'm trying to keep it simple. But the idea is that you, in some way, shape, or form, account for that. And that can be a challenge because it can get very tangly, especially as you try to become more compatible with more groups of mods. I discovered this absolute tangly nightmare when I tried to make Galdoc's manufacturing compatible with everything. Though conceptually it can be compatible to just about everything, it turns out that it is a lot of work to make it actually play so. So
Yeah, so a good thought there is just, as you're designing a mod, think about compatibility from the beginning. What do you want to be compatible with? What do you not care if you're compatible with? What would you actually say, you know what, I don't want to be compatible with that because the vision of that thing, the design around that thing is so antithetical to my design that it would be ruining the experience that I'm putting forth. You want to be careful with that though, because the whole point of modding is player choice and giving players freedom. But if it is something so blatant, like one example of something that really makes no sense to be compatible would be like the classic Pyanodons and Bob's Angels. And people wanted both, but it's like their design, especially now, this was less true back in the day when Pi was more of just recipe soup. But now Pyanodons is so much its own thing. Like adding Angel Bobs into it makes no sense. Like the only
yeah.
reason you would do it is because you're coming from the Minecraft world where people do just throw kitchen sinks at the wall and have fun with it. But like Pyanodons is designed to be this self-contained thing. There's already all these different ways to make iron plates. You don't want to add even more ways to make iron plates from Bob's Angels that are way cheaper and easier than the Pyanodons ways. It's just bad. So think about, what do you want to be compatible with from the beginning, and that way you can save yourself probably quite a bit of headache by kind of starting there rather than ending there and having to rechange a lot of things.
And also, it doesn't have to be like anathema. Like it is valid to say, I'm doing something, it's just different enough that it wouldn't make sense to put these two things together. And moreover, it would be creating conflicts. That's usually where I would say the line ought to be drawn.
It's also
Because
valid to just respect your own time and energy and say, I don't have the time and energy to make compatibility with anything, so it's not gonna be. And if other
yeah,
people want to add compatibility patches, they can. Like, it's totally valid to do that too.
I can say as someone who tried that with Galdoc manufacturing, it doesn't work. That's the one. Oops, there goes my camera. What I ended up having was I said, I'm looking for some heroes to come and make a Galdoc manufacturing Bob's Angels patch, and a Factorio 2 patch, and a Space Age or Space Exploration patch, and a Pyanodons patch. And no one did except for one person. This person's name was he was King Arthur. He was a dev for Pi, and he basically made in a weekend a really quick slapdash patch to make Galdoc's manufacturing compatible with Pyanodons. And it didn't. I mean, it technically was a compatibility patch, but it wasn't really that fun because it only influenced the vanilla recipes. There were no recipes for the greater Pyanodons experience. And though I made a slew of art for it, like every single metal in Pyanodons, I made Galdoc's manufacturing part icons for. I have it on my hard drive still. But it never got put into the game. and it was just very hard to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
someone to
My
do it.
point isn't so much that you should assume that someone else will do it. My point is just that
Sure,
if you
sure.
don't have the time or energy to do it, you don't need to, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And if no one
yeah,
else makes it the way it needs to be made, that's okay too. But like I'm
yeah.
just saying, like, as a modder, you want to respect your own time as
Yes.
well, and don't do things you don't want to do just because other people want compatibility. That might not be something you have time and energy for.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to counter that. I was just, as someone who's had the experience, I thought it might be interesting to share because it
Yeah.
was fun.
Well, and it
Uh,
always depends on, usually the most community sourced success comes from the really popular things wanting to mix with the other really popular things that make the most sense to mix with. So, like, if you end up with a really popular mod, yeah, there's a much better chance that someone wants to help you with compatibility patches versus, your mod only has 100 downloads. Yeah,
yeah,
those are different things.
sure. But yeah, so the other parts of it was that there are the other challenges you're going to run into is understanding the inheritance tree. So, as a fun fact, I one day was on stream and I made a very cursed mod that what it did was it turned armor into science packs because they share a root. So it turns out that I made the most absurd things into science packs,
Just because of
and
the
I was
durability.
because of the inheritance tree, because of the things that essentially. Okay, so the way it works is that you have the base prototype, and then that breaks out into like entity or items or various other things. And in those categories, there are things that break out even more. And like eventually, like at the top, you have a prototype item, and then at the bottom, you have like ammo or whatever. But they also had armor, and for some reason, like the science packs are listed as tools. And it turns out that those share inheritance with, in some way. I'm not going to explain it all right now, but like in some way, it shares it well enough that you can make armors into science packs. So seeing things like that are going to help you understand how to make what you're looking for. But it can be a bit weird because sometimes you're going to be working on an entity and you're going to be like, where's the property I need? And what you're not going to realize is that that property, though it's there, it's like on a previous thing that was inherited from. So um, you may have to do a little bit of digging and looking around in order to really understand how to fill in some of the property details for your stuff.
And
And
just to
it
be
also may,
clear, that's kind of like comparing a, let's say, a wall in a room to the room itself to the house itself, where it's like the wall has a color, but the room has maybe an air temperature. So the wall has the air temperature property, but it came from the room like category. It's kind of that type
yeah.
of idea.
So like, yeah, you have a prototype, which is built in code. Then you could have like an achievement prototype, which is a child of that. It has all the properties of a prototype, but also new properties
Right.
that make it an achievement prototype. Then as a child of that, there is achievement prototype with condition. And then there is a child of that, the complete objective achievement prototype. But as a sibling, don't build entity achievement prototype. Don't craft manually achievement prototype,
Right.
and so on
Right.
and so forth. And so these prototypes have children and siblings that essentially share properties in some fashion. So,
And can you be
yeah,
multiple? If you're thinking about this as like branches and leaves, can you end up
yeah.
with something that is two leaves at once?
No, this is called composition. And so in the programming world, composition is exactly what you just described, where you inherit the properties of two different things, and Factorio does not support that. You can hack it in sometimes. I'm saying very carefully, but the general idea there is that there are some cases where you can make particular entities that are called compound entities. And what you are doing there is you are literally having two prototype things built, one of which is surrogate to the other, and you're controlling all of this with runtime scripts. And this leads to a bit of jank. And I will, so actually, I don't have to do this in order. I was saving this for a little bit later when the engine is sad. This is when you are really fighting the engine in order to achieve whatever the goal that you're trying to do is. These days, there's much more structure around it, and because it's been done so many times, excuse me, a lot of the edge cases that present when you are trying to do something like this, they've kind of been worked out, so it's a bit easier nowadays, but you are still essentially fighting the engine because the thing you're trying to make doesn't have a single prototype and it doesn't fit in neatly, and you're going to have to essentially in script account for all the random behaviors. Like, for example, was it Picker Dollies by Nexala, where you could like move entities, and then for a while you could try to move a compound entity, and one of them wouldn't move.
Yeah, and
So
it would break, or it would break things, or one of them would get destroyed. Yeah, yeah, it was a good time.
yeah, so there's edge cases that we'll talk about in a little bit, but just understand that you're fighting the engine at that point, and that is not great.
Yeah,
Which
and
leads
like,
me. Oh,
oh,
sorry.
sorry,
Go
just a
ahead.
good example of like a compound entity. Like I know a lot of mods I've played throughout the years have like an accumulator as part of a compound entity in something else, where like essentially
Interesting.
representing like a building having its own accumulator or something like that, where it can like have a power delay or it can add power outputs. But when you mouse over the building, it won't show you the tooltip of the accumulator or something. It only
Yeah.
shows you the tooltip of the building. So compound entities get a little messy with how are you displaying to the player what this thing actually does, because the tooltip won't look right for the player. And so you have to, and it's gotten so much better over the years. As someone who's just consumed mods, I used to be able to spot almost every time a compound entity was being used because it was
Mhm.
clear through some amount of jank or another. But modders have
Yeah.
gotten better. New mod APIs have been added. Space Age added a ton of, so like now, between all of the developments in modding technology, both on the how do modders do it and how is it even possible end, both of those have improved a lot over the last 5 years or whatever. And now there's lots of compound entities running around in Pionodons and I don't even notice them, which is, it's
Yeah.
so that's a great place to ask for help
Oh,
on
I'll see.
the
Totally.
Discord for like how to do that successfully.
It's been something that there are. I'll talk a little bit about some of my ideas a little if at the end if we have time, but like there's been a lot of ideas that I've had for mods that would look like a compound entity because the thing doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, but that brings me to the when the engine starts to struggle. So what we just talked about before with all the making prototypes and stuff is when the engine is happy. These are simpler. I say simpler relatively, but these are more straightforward mods. And now we're talking about something called runtime scripting. So there are three phases to data in Factorio. There's the settings phase, there's the data phase, or the prototype phase, if you will, and the runtime phase. There's efforts to sort of like people just colloquially refer to both settings and what's it called, the data stage as the prototype stage. Fine, but the point is that there are what we just talked about was mostly taking place in the prototype stage, where you write stuff down and the game loads it, and then you're good. Runtime is when the game is running. It's the time it is running, literally and baked into the name. And these scripts are usually what control behaviors for things that need to be customized while the game is running. So this is good examples of this would be things that have GUI buttons. So like if it adds a button on your screen, it's doing some runtime scripting. There can be cases when you're doing stuff that isn't that. I think there's like some very simple things you can do, but generally speaking, if you're adding buttons, you're doing runtime scripting. If you're having something like a space elevator in space exploration, that's runtime scripting. A lot of these things are built in order to essentially treat the Factorio engine like it was a regular game engine. Here's what I mean. So in I say regular game programming. Let's say I'm using something like Godot or I guess even Unity or Unreal. The game engine has some assumptions that are being made, and then you write code and you have to create things that handle various features of your game. Now, typically with like Godot and Unity and all that stuff, these game engines, they don't make too many assumptions about what you're doing. So you have to, in a sense, bake or make from whole cloth a like an NPC dialogue handler, or you have to make something that handles the particles for the whatever weapon you're using. The various different elements of your game need handlers and such, or they need to like tie into their event system, whatever that thing is. And all of that stuff remains true in the Factorio engine. It's just that the Factorio engine is a little bit, I say a little bit, it's I would say fairly less robust than a full game engine. You're not going to be making a full 3D engine in this thing, I don't think. I'm sure someone's going to be like, I heard that. I took that as a challenge. And then, I
Yeah,
took
no,
that personally.
no. There's no 3D in Factorio unless it's
Right.
hyperjank. Yeah.
Right. But like the point is though that you can basically, if you're going to build a new system whole cloth in Factorio, you're going to be using the scripting engine, and you are going to run into a whole bunch of uh, friction. Maybe is the right word here. There are a lot of things to keep in mind. Um, so you need to make sure that your code is performant, which means that it's not that you never operate on tick. I got to be careful here. It's used a thing that most people may not know. So there are events in Factorio, and these events get called anytime something of note happens. And what I mean by of note is what's basically coded in the engine to be of note. Something like the player clicked. Okay, that's a thing of note, and it throws an event, what got clicked on, etc. You put down a new entity, like you placed an inserter, that would cause an event to happen. And then what happens is, whenever those events happen, you in script can hook into those events, and stuff can then occur. You can swap out the thing that just got built, or you can blow it up if it's on the wrong surface, or whatever, right? You can do whatever you like, more or less. There is one called on tick. This event gets called every tick. And as you can imagine, if you load up too much processing on tick, you're going to tank your mod. This does not mean do not use on tick. You can. Just be careful with what you're doing. And there are other things that you can do, like on nth tick, for example, which can essentially take a workload that doesn't have to all happen on one tick and instead spread it out across several ticks. That's a good way of doing it. There are other things where you can, instead of doing everything all at once on one tick, maybe if you have this giant task, you can chop up that task and say, I'll do this chunk on one tick, and then this next chunk, and this next chunk, and control the size of the chunks so that it never slows the game down. But these are the kinds of things that you're going to be thinking about,
Yeah.
no matter what it is you're doing, in order to make the game run smoothly with your mod running.
Yeah, and one example, just from like Pinedons, when you have a reproductive complex, it doesn't run without any modules. But that's not how buildings work in Factorio. Buildings will run whether they have modules or not. They might just run at a slower speed or whatever. And so in Pinedons, there's this custom script somewhere under the hood that prevents these buildings from running when there's 0 modules in them, and that is done via a script. And so when you place a module in, at least this is how it used to be. It's been a long time, so I don't know if this is still accurate. But the way it used to be is like you'd place a new module in, and it might be a couple seconds before the building would go from disabled to enabled, because you can tell that under the hood they wanted to make this a performant thing. So they weren't constantly checking every building on every tick to see if they had modules or not. They were just doing it once in a while, because that's not something, you're not doing it very often. Most
Right.
of the time you put the modules in and you don't touch it for 400 hours. And so you want this to be something that costs basically 0 performance, because it doesn't need to be checking every tick. But that's a very kind of cut and dried example of like
Yeah.
scripting.
But yeah, another example would be, I think Code Green, I can't remember the name of it. It's like a belt analyzer, which allows you to see your belt networks and highlights it. But the thing is that because belt networks can be sort of arbitrarily large, instead of doing all of it at once, you basically you click on it, and the GUI element spreads, and it does like a certain amount per tick so that it never overwhelms the process. Um, so these are all good examples of things that you're going to have to be taking into account as you make these things. But you can also do all sorts of stuff. Like I made a custom GUI for a combinator. It didn't actually end up making it to production. I was making it as both an experiment in learning how to do GUI stuff, but also to help out Sir Puck in order to help him with his peer-to-peer mod. But the thing is that like there are ways of doing this, and it can work. It's just that you want to be aware of the limitations of the engine and start doing and do things in a certain way. Experience is a great teacher here. But there are things that the engine does not like at all, and likely never will, or at least it's going to be very cumbersome to work with. And this is what I think of when I say the engine is sad, right? The engine is happy when you're just doing prototypes. The engine starts to struggle when you start doing runtime stuff, and the engine is sad when you try to hook into events that don't exist and have no way of existing. Let me give you the classic example that everyone wants and that will never, ever exist if you listen to the devs. I have to put that little asterisk in there, or air quotes, or whatever I'm going to call it. I want an event for when a craft completes.
Yep. I've heard
This
about
would
that one.
This is popularly understood to be something that will tank performance. I've never seen it. I'm assuming that people who are able to make pull requests on the engine itself, on the C++ side, have seen this and they all kind of like nod along. Yep, that'll tank performance. I've seen it happen with my own two eyes. This limited number of human beings, of which I am not a member, are doing right this very second, listening to the words I've said. Um, so the point that I'm trying to make is that there are some events that can't exist. There are some ways around this because there's this other thing called triggers, which I don't fully understand. But essentially, there are some things that can trigger stuff that is somehow different from an event. That is, from what I'm to understand, things that allow you to hook into stuff spoiling, for example. I don't think those are events. Maybe they are. I know there was some back and forth on that. But there are other things that can, like if you don't have an event for it, you might be able to find a workaround in a set of triggers, but you are still limited to what they have made. And the way you would have to find that is, excuse me, is you're essentially now having to get into how can I navigate the API documentation well enough? Because I remember one time Code Green had me going through trying to find the trigger I was looking for, and he knew it existed. And he's like, okay, click on this, then click on this, then click on this, then click on this. And I'm like 5 layers deep by the time he's done inside the API. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know where we are anymore. I hope you know where we're driving because this is tough. But it did give me the ability to do the thing I was trying to get in. So just be aware, if an event doesn't exist and there's no trigger for it, you're probably going to have to either re-jury rig your idea or maybe scrap it. Usually there's a way to re-jury rig the idea. A good example of this is the good enough solution of why they don't put in, and I disagree with this, like exclusive probabilities.
Mm-hmm.
They don't put in exclusive probabilities, just as so everyone understands. When you make a recipe, there are times when you get a result some percent of the time. And the thing is, they are like it rolls the dice for every single one individually.
Yeah, I think we actually talked about this in a different episode. Yeah, it's just like if you had a 50% chance to get thing A and a 50% chance to get thing B, and in real life you're representing like, oh, I rolled a dice and it landed on or I flipped a coin and it should give me a heads coin half the time and a tails coin half the time. And that's done in an assembler. Obviously it would make no sense to have coin heads and tails at the same time. But the game, as it works, there's a fourth of the time it'll give you a heads and tails coin, and a fourth of the time it'll give you no coins, and there's no way to make
quantum
it give you one or the
confirmed.
other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we have quantumly entangled assembling machines. Got it. You also can't get too terribly creative with the graphics. You can get creative. They do, and to be fair, they have added in stuff, but there's still stuff I want to do that I don't think is ever going to make it in the engine, and it's not even that hard. Well, for example, I want to be able to do some post-processing on stuff. I want masks, and I want to be able to use those masks in order to tinker with what's being displayed. So the reason I would like to do this is, for example, I want to put in weather effects, like rain that can turn on and off, and that looks good. I want to put in things that happen in space that I might want, like that are more than just show the planet in the background, which, by the way, is a hack and a gloriously wonderful hack. It makes
or even like a mask over a sprite, which would make part of the building invisible if it was crafting a certain thing. Or like that's what a mask could do, right? Or change the colors, or even overlay a different sprite on top of a sprite using the mask when appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, and just so everyone has an idea of what I mean by a mask, imagine, if you will, a piece of paper that you've taken a knife to and you've cut out like the exact shape of something. And what that mask will do is it will allow to show through where you've cut out the thing that you want to show, and the rest of it gets blocked by the paper. It's just that instead of it being physical paper in the computer world, it's whether or not it shows at all. So in the area you want the thing that you're making to show, you can show it, and then the area that it's not, you don't. And this sounds simple enough as an idea, but it's a very, very common way of getting some, I would go ahead and say, advanced is the wrong word, but you can do some pretty complicated things just by having masking layers and things like that in your whatever. So that's one thing that I would love. So there are times when you can get pretty creative with the graphics. Again, not to bring up Code Green again, but he did something that was very clever, and we were able to get 3D ish motion of planets in a space map, and I made art for these planets. And someday I would like to get my hands on this code, but I don't and I can't. But it is something that is basically like superlatively clever as far as I'm concerned, in what you can do with the engine. Um, because we were manually calculating the location of things. You already sent it to me, he says in the text. All right, well,
LOL.
did you? I disagree. All right, so that's okay. Yes, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so with the graphics, like, okay, so you can't do masks. So then what's easy to do? Like, obviously, new sprites is easy. What are some of the other things that the engine makes easy on you with graphics?
So if you want to add in animations for your assembling machines, all you have to do is build a sprite sheet. There's numerous tools online. Most of them, there's plenty of them that are free. You can make icons. This is something that you can do pretty much whatever with. There's someone named Planetfall who got a lot of pay dirt basically doing I'm not sure was it Illustrator or something. It was basically vector graphics art. Never touched Blender, and it still looked okay. I went through and I made some of them in Blender, but like there's still plenty of stuff in there where he was able to get these things done. Great. All right. So there are basically anything that's existent in the game as it is now. If you can
Right.
see it, you can probably make a version of it.
Makes sense.
What you cannot do is tinker with shaders. And what are shaders? So when we think of programming a game, we think of just we have this big block of code and it runs and magically stuff appears. But if you're a programmer, you recognize that you're going to need to break up the code into different chunks, and different chunks will be responsible for different things. Shaders are responsible for rendering graphics from data onto your screen, essentially. I'm being a little bit fast and loose here, but a great way to think about what a shader is to say, okay, in memory, you have a screen buffer. And this is basically like an array in memory that has data for every single pixel. And that's RGB data. And depending on I think you can have like HDR games where you might have an intensity value, whatever. It doesn't matter. Point is, you have data for every pixel. And you're going to then just put that on the screen, right? But what filled those pixel values? What actually made those things happen? And are there any clever tricks you can do in order to tinker with that array as not often as possible? So basically, that's called your video buffer, and that buffer is essentially you have that data, and it's going to constantly be updating what's in that buffer when it gets time to draw it on the screen. Shaders essentially fill that role. They take the fact, like in a 3D game, a shader would take, okay, so I have this model of a wall. It would take the data that is the wall, which is the X, Y, and Z coordinate of every point that makes up that polygon. In this case, it'd be a triangle. So all three of those. It would take a reference to the actual texture to apply to it, which is going to be like in Minecraft, you can see the texels. They're the big blocky chunks on each thing. And it would apply those. If there's like anti-aliasing, it would like blur the edges. If there are lighting effects, it would apply those then, etc. There's all the different effects that you're going to layer in there, and the shaders essentially capture those effects happening so that when it goes from the data representation, which is like a texture file and some vertices and all that good stuff, and then makes it to the video buffer, that shader is what makes it happen super duper fast. It is very fast. It's so fast that we kind of take it for granted at this point, but like there are limitations to what you can do with shaders, and the idea being that it's almost always going forward in some way, right? It's very like it doesn't have a whole lot of ability to tinker with values. You can, but generally speaking, they're very, very efficient. They eschewed a lot of flexibility for speed, and that's why you can have video games. And Factorio has shaders. You might say, but wait a second, it's a 2D game. Yeah, it's a 2D game, and yet trees rustle in the breeze. That is accomplished with shaders. The tree data is in the actual engine. You have this thing that's been loaded as a sprite, and nowhere in data is a version of that sprite that is like blown to the left and then blown to the right, nor are there the interstitial
Right.
frames of that tree blowing. The shader is what is responsible for taking that tree picture and altering it such that it looks like there is wind blowing.
Yeah,
under the
and there's a
hood.
lot of stuff. I think they talked about it in the FFF with the asteroids in Space Age that
Yes.
utilize shader stuff that you can read about on the Friday Facts if you want to go find that one.
Yep. And they basically account for different things. Like a normal map was one thing that I, for the longest time, wanted in Factorio. And they put it in, and it's great. Not on everything, but on asteroids, for example. You can go play with the shaders. It will be local to your computer only. I don't remember the language it's in. I don't remember if it's GLSL or HLSL or CG or whatever. There's different shader languages. But you can find the shader files on your computer and you can go screw around with them. You cannot package those in a mod. You'll just have your own local thing looking a certain way. And you have to know what you can and cannot hook into, and you're not going to know without experimenting. So it can be hard. So you unfortunately cannot do that. I would love to. It would make me so happy. So another thing where the engine can be sad is when you have to interface with a system that works but is super cumbersome to deal with. So a good example of this is the animation system for making a drop pod land on a planet. That is a very cumbersome system to work with. It is not bad, and honestly, they built in a whole lot of tools to make it as smooth as possible, and yet it is still fairly chunky to deal with. If you want to try to make a very specific pattern of ore appear on the planet's surface, whatever you're trying to make, that is also fairly chunky. I would say a little surprisingly so, considering the simplicity with which you can go into something like Blender and make these sort of noise maps and make patches and stuff. But it is what it is. They're called noise expressions, in case you're wondering what that system is that you have to interface with. And it's not that you can't do it, it's that get ready to do some learning on the things that go on underneath the hood, like how Perlin noise works a little bit, and how they have a spot noise function, and then learn how they've implemented it. To be fair, it is much nicer in 2.0 than it was in 1.1, which is the version of Factorio that we had before the expansion dropped. So it's not like it's all bad. It's just, it's there.
Yeah,
It's something
and I mean,
different.
in general, kind of what we're hearing here, and what's been true, and what will probably always be true, is that like Factorio has to be a game that's built for its core experience. I would imagine it's probably in the 80 to 90% range of players of Factorio never download a single mod, and so when you're looking at like and this is a lot of games challenges. I've thought about this these days. Magic the Gathering has a bit of a rocky community experience because there's the enfranchised players who have lots of opinions about things, and they don't even agree on most things either, which is very entertaining. But Wizards of the Coast, owned by Hasbro, is trying to make gobs of money. They've found out that, Universes Beyond makes us billions of dollars, and so they're just going full tilt into these things that the enfranchised player base is pushing back against a lot of it and a lot of the time. But the problem is those players aren't the players making 90 whatever percent of their money. So
Yeah.
to some level, you have to ask yourself as a company, how much do we care about the people who love our game and their lifestyle is our game, and they've put lots of money into our game, but aren't actually the people making us money? And Wooba obviously cares much more about its players than Wizards of the Coast. My intent was not to compare those two, but simply to compare the ideas of you have to ask those questions. And Wooba has made their game very performant for the core game experience at the cost of some flexibility with modding. There are things that they could have allowed modders to hook into that might have made the regular game itself, a little bit less performant, but would have given modders more options. And they've had to ask themselves for the last 7, 10, 12 years, however long the game's been in development, when is that worth it?
Yes. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, but that is essentially one of the important questions, especially if there is something you want to be in the engine that you run into when the engine is sad and you have no workaround. Which is why I'm very happy to announce that we're going to be adding a Paw Patrol mod for Factorio built into the base engine to facilitate that 90% that really enjoys Paw Patrol. My youngest child is what enjoys Paw Patrol. This is why it's on my brain. Um, that show. Anyways, the we've already talked a little bit about compound entities and how that can be a community structured solution. There are other community structured solutions to try to solve certain problems, things involving beacons, for example. But that's also a place where the engine can be sad. And the other thing is I hate the way this is named, although I understand it. So Factorio under the hood is broken up into two chunks. I say kind of two chunks. Basically, when the Factorio engine loads, it searches in a couple of different places, and one of those places is called core, and one of those places is called base, which I don't like because those both sound like fundamentally the very essence words, right? Like the core of the mod or the core of the game and the base of the game, right? But the point is that one of them is something you can tinker with a little in the sense of like you can take content from base and in your mod change it. That's why you can change recipes for how much it,
Right.
or
You
it
could change the
makes a copper
sprite
plate.
for an assembling machine.
But in core, I think you're pretty sunk. I actually, so there was one time I made a mod that basically took the cloud textures that was being applied to the ground and I made it a brick texture just to see if I could. And it worked. And it looked ridiculous. But the point is that it was when I was trying to do some clever graphics work. But I couldn't actually oh, Code Green says you can edit core prototypes. I am completely wrong. And you just can't turn off core mod. Oh, okay, very well. Very well. Well, then never mind. I guess you can't edit core. Fine. But that tends to be things that are like super fundamental to the game, like the icons used for inserters to indicate where its drop point is, that little triangle thing. So that is the sort of stuff that ends up in core.
Right. So there could be in a very like when I say overhaul mod, I mean more than like if you were overhauling the game experience itself, trying to almost make a new game in Factorio, there would be some bloat coming from core that you couldn't remove is essentially what you're getting at. Like if you had no use for those icons, you can't
Yeah.
just take them out to make your mod more performant.
Fortunately, it's very minimal. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
you
It
wouldn't
wouldn't
care.
really matter, but the point still stands.
And you could actually, they did, and just I'm gonna throw this blurb out there because you made me think of something that I hadn't put in the notes. There is I don't know what the name of the mod is. Basically, it makes base not required anymore. There is a mod that Wooba made for people who want to do a complete overhaul of Factorio that removes base as a required thing. That's all the mod does, and then you can go ahead and make your own game ish.
Yeah.
No one ever took them up on it. I wanted to, but I kept running into this isn't something I can do in the engine, even if I get rid of base. Like I still can't make my whatever Blargoldoop thing.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like base is not adding enough bloat to where it makes sense to remove it in the first place 99% of the time. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and as Code Green in the chat, sorry, I know this isn't going to be available for the people who are listening on the podcast, but there's a person named Code Green in the chat saying the engine expects and needs core to be able to function.
Code Green
So,
is like the Santa of the modding world. He like gives you presents of help and glory. He's been on the podcast, so you guys know him if you're a listener of the podcast. So yeah, we
and
love
once
Code
a
Green.
year on the release date, he'll come by your house, break in, jump down your chimney, and be like, "Here, I've given
Basically,
you an array."
well, I mean, not to name names too much, but I was the other day I was nerd sniped by the train braking algorithm, and I was trying to create the math of like figuring out train braking force. How much time does it actually save you? So I wanted to know through math formulas, like if my train is going at 242 kilometers an hour, what is its braking distance? What is the amount of time it will take to come to a complete stop? And I wanted to be able to effectively calculate that on the math end without having to like test it in the game. And it took me a hot second to get there, and Code Green was instrumental in helping me figure that out. So yeah, Code Green's great. Anyway, let's move on to talking about a little bit of like if you in the idea stage, because we've talked a little bit about
Yeah.
when the engine struggles, but let's talk about more the forming of a mod. What is it like to kind of come up with an idea and move towards turning that into an actual mod, and what are some of the considerations you have along that way?
So the way I always approach it is, what is the thing that I want the mod to be? What is it addressing? Who needs it to be addressed? And essentially get to the idea of what is my target audience. Usually there's something that's bugging me. In making Galdoc manufacturing, it was the abstraction point was just in this really weird place, and I wanted to push it back further. There were other things that I wanted to do as well, but that right there gave me enough of a sort of mission statement, if you will, to say this mod is going to be for people who also want the abstraction point to be pushed back. When I say the abstraction point, like inside of an assembling machine, if you put a plate in there, you get I don't know what if you
A
put a plate
gear.
and a green circuit in
Gear.
there and a gear, right? You get a inserter. Why? I don't know. It's been abstracted away. So what I did is I took the abstraction point and said, you know what? We're going to move it back. We're not getting rid of it. You're still going to put a plate into a machine and get something out. It's just that the thing you get is going to be more granular. It's going to be like a sheet stock, or maybe you'll roll it and you'll get like a wire in some way. And then you can turn that into screws, and then you can turn those screws and that plating into whatever, right? So for me, and I think for a lot of people, I wanted to give the player the ability to make some stuff. This is more of like an overhaul sort of notion, but like there are other small notions too, as you mentioned earlier. In fact, as you mentioned at the beginning of every stream, there are mods that address some aspect of the game that bothers you or bothered the mod author enough that they felt it necessary to go make a mod to resolve it or address it in some way. So once you figure out what it is that you want your thing to do, just understand that you want to think about what your target audience is going to be, and you kind of hit on it earlier, cater to that target audience. You do want your target audience to be wide enough that you get people who, might not have realized that they want this experience, that they give it a shot and think, oh yeah, no, I had a good experience. You do want that, but you also want to make sure that you do not alienate the people who you are trying to help, essentially. And with Magic the Gathering, making the Magic the Gathering Paw Patrol set. I don't know. I might. You
You
mentioned this earlier.
laugh. I like it's coming, man. It's all it's anyway.
My
No,
brother plays Magic the
you
Gathering
bring up
still. I
you bring
played
up
it
a
in high
good
school.
point about like target audience though, but I want to take half a step back. That even that, to be fair, it you almost need to ask yourself, what am I even looking to have an audience? You might want to make a mod just for you, and that's totally fine too. And then so there's a spectrum of how much am I making the mod for me, and then on that spectrum too, I'm completely making this mod for the audience. I don't even care about it, right? And there's a full spectrum in between those two,
Mhm.
and all of the points along it are valid. It's just good to know where you fall, and that helps you
Yeah,
prioritize. This is my taste. This is what I want. Oh, but if I do this, my audience will hate it, and I do care about what they think. So let's not go all the way. Like it helps you manage that
sure.
spectrum if you know where you're at along that spectrum.
And I would caution the person who operates in the mod making space. If you are here only for the act of creation, while I respect that and encourage that even, I would say it might be worth it to take a moment to consider what other people's experience is going to be. Not because I'm saying that particular point on the spectrum is invalid, but because I've almost never run into a case where someone has come back with something that, what they want to do is so specific that they're the only people on the planet Earth that is going to enjoy it. They can
Right.
usually maybe tinker with it a little bit. I'm reminded of King Missile's song "Sensitive Artist," the person who is like, nobody understands me because I am so deep. It's like, okay,
Yeah, you're probably
maybe.
not unique, is the idea I think that Galdoc's saying, in the sense that what you want is probably something someone else wants too. So the goal is
Exactly.
to kind of try to
Exactly.
find that happy point where, like, you're not just
Yeah.
making yourself happy with the mod, you're making all of the people that are also like you happy with the mod. The question there, though, becomes, again, it is valid, I think, on the axis of I just want to make this for myself, because then you don't have to worry about some of the downsides, which we will talk about in a minute, of just like you have to update it, other people care when something
Yeah.
becomes incompatible. And if you don't want to deal with all that, then you literally might just make the mod for yourself.
Yeah. And you can still release it and just say
Yeah.
do with it what you will. No warranty implied. you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Another thing is art, and this is the way I've explained it to people in the past. This is the best way I have to explain it. Having good art is not a hard requirement, but the absence of awful art is a soft requirement. That is to say that yes, you can make like gray box art for your mod. I do believe that there is a satisfactory in Factorio mod out there that basically has like white squares or rectangles, and on it is a picture like taken screenshot style from the game Satisfactory. I mean, and I know people who have seen it and have talked about it, but I have never met anyone who's played it. And it's been a curiosity that's been mentioned, but like, that is what I would call awful art. And that's okay in the sense of like at that stage of the development process, that's where you're at. I talk about that in one of my videos. It's like you're going to be in that stage for a bit, but if you're going to publish this thing and you want people to play it and enjoy it, then you want to have something that's non-awful. And the bar is very low to be non-awful. Like you don't have to do a whole lot of effort to make it non-awful. Like basically put in any effort whatsoever. The community has resources out there to help, but this is something that I would encourage everyone to do a little bit of, because though I found late in life that I really enjoy art, and I mean, I kind of always knew that I enjoy art. I was always doodling in my notebooks and stuff. One of the classes I enjoyed the most, and I only took one of in college, was art. I took a drawing class. We had charcoals and paper and stuff. So I mean, I enjoyed art my whole life, but I was never really good at it. My bachelor's is in physics and my master's is in math education. So the fact that I found some joy in making art, I would suggest a lot of people can find some joy in it. Even if you say to yourself, I am not an artist, give it a shot. See what you think.
Well,
Give it
and
an honest shake.
yeah, and I mean, again, you get into the maybe you would like to, but you just don't have time or whatever. But there are lots of, back to the resources. There are a lot of licensed mods that allow you to use their art as your own art in your mod, and Angels is the biggest one of those. Tons of overhaul mods have used the art from the Angels overhaul mods because of the licensing allows that, and you can use the Angels art in your own mods, and you can recolor the buildings, and that gives you a lot of options. And so there's a lot of stuff there, along with the base game buildings, especially with Space Age now. There's so many more sprites that are available for kind of mixing and matching with, like, you know, if you want to recolor this building or make this building look a little smaller or bigger, like there's just a lot of options now between that and other mods that have a permissive license. If you don't want to do your own art, there's a lot more options than there used to be. So don't get scared off if you're like, oh, I want to make a mod, and there's also Hurricane is the name of a guy who's made beautiful art that's like A+ level, like meshes with Factorio's art design perfectly, better than Angels.
Art.
Better than Angels, I would argue.
Art.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's really good. And that's free to use because Hurricane is a saint, apparently. And so you can go download all of those. And there's like, I mean, there's probably 36 different sprites on there that are like animated. And again, they mesh with like Factorio's art style. So yeah. So all that to say, if you are scared, if you're like, I have a great idea for a mod, but it would require some new buildings and some art, and I can't do art and I don't want to do art, then don't worry, there's options for you.
Yeah, exactly. Other things to keep in mind are that you are going to be, and this is something that I'm finding out with Galdoc manufacturing, get ready to update for the rest of your life. Yes, you can pass the torch to someone else. This is a very valid thing to do. But like, it's hard to do that emotionally. I don't want to pass the torch. I want to. I like my torch. But the thing is, I'm now like I think it's going to be this week. I'm planning on doing an update. I'm going to do a stream where I update Galdoc manufacturing, and it's going to be this week. Because I've been sort of putting it off. I've done a chunk of the work on stream, but things have progressed forward, and it might be broken again. So I need to go fix it and compatibility with Factorio 2. So. Yeah. So you mentioned here about licensing. There are licenses that you can publish under that are more permissive or restrictive, and it's basically I can like the way to think about these licenses. It's like the copyleft, if you will. That's the you can't care. How did I phrase this? There was I needed to write this down and I failed to. It's like I don't care versus you can't care. MIT is I don't care, right? You can do whatever you want with it. The GPL 3, I think, is you can't care. As in, like, if I publish this thing for free, you have to then also do so. And continue it being permissible for everyone. So like MIT license, you can lock it down. You can say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to, copyright it, and now it's mine, and I'm going to make money off of it.
MIT is basically saying, like, you could use everything I made and go sell it for $1 million, and that's all your money. Like, it is
Yeah.
100% basically open source, permissive, like anyone can do
Yeah.
anything they want with this. And that's what I've done for my mods, because my mods are a few lines of code that mostly were written by other people in the Factorio help Discord. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't care what you do with this. This isn't mine. I have no,
Sure.
but if you've put hundreds of hours of your life into this thing, and then someone else were to go and make a bunch of money off that, would that make you feel bad? If yes, then you need to look a little more carefully into what license you pick so that that can't be legal.
And so the way I like to think about this is that when we're in the Factorio community, yes, there will be people who just take whatever they want to a certain extent. If the license says it, they have that right. But I will say that there has been some contention in the past about the societal norms around that. Personally, I like it if someone wants to use Galdoc's manufacturing art, if you come and talk to me first. This is not to say that I'll say no. There's been no one to whom I have said hard no, if you wanted to use my art. What I will do is I will first say, what can we do to solve your art problem such that you get your own identity with what you're trying to create? Because art can impact that. Because of the ubiquity of both Hurricane's art and Bob's Angels art and even some Crastorio art, you can commonly play a mod, and when you see an art asset from a mod pack that you know, and you see it in someone else's thing, it's not a good feeling. It's because you go, well, that's a little derivative. I have one of those already, or something like that. You say, you know what, this is, do I like this or not? So I would caution people who just want to take art assets willy nilly that there can be some negative consequences for it. Not to say you can't do it. Just be aware of these things moving forward so that you can actually, make a mod, make the thing that you want to be out there as possible. So,
Yeah, well, and
and being as successful as
I'm
possible.
gonna push back just a smidge on what you said, because I actually
Sure.
think, like, for example, the electrolyzers in Angel's art. Using the Angel's electrolyzer in your mod isn't that different than using the base level Factorio assembler in your mod. Because if you're using it as an electrolyzer and someone has seen that in a different mod as an electrolyzer, and you're using it as an electrolyzer, they're going to know, oh, that's the Angels electrolyzer. Or maybe they didn't even play Angels and they used it as an electrolyzer in a different mod. But either way, for the most part, I don't think it's that. Obviously, it's a little different because you're using a different mod art rather than the Factorio base art. But the idea is you're using a building for a function that you're not claiming you made yourself, that is allowed to be used for that purpose, and most players are going to more or less recognize it. Now, what it won't do is give you kudos. You don't get brownie points for using Angel's art in your mod, right?
Sure.
No, like you said, it's a hard requirement to not have crappy art, right? And so, or what
I
did you
said it's
say?
soft.
I phrased it wrong.
The absence of awful art is a soft requirement.
Yeah,
Having
yeah.
good art is not a hard requirement.
Yeah, and I think what I'm getting at here is, like, having your own art is the only way to get lots of cred, street cred, brownie points from your players that are like, oh my gosh, I love the art of this. People aren't going to play your mod that used Angels and base level Space Age art and be like, oh my gosh, the art in this mod is amazing. Because it's what they've seen before. It's not
Yeah.
this new stuff. But I also wouldn't say that it necessarily has a huge downside. Like, I want to encourage people, like, if that's what you need to do for your art, like, you can still make a great mod that people love. Nullius, which is a very popular mod, one of my favorites of all time, used Angels assets. And I don't think that it, like, obviously Nullius would have been more popular if they had had a whole suite of their own custom art that was as of good or better quality than the Angels art, but, like, that's a huge ask. And so if you have a great idea for an overhaul, just make it and use these art assets. I just want to encourage people to, like, don't be scared to do that, thinking that, oh, people are going to see the Angels art and then quit my mod. It is true that some people might, but I don't think that it's such a powerful motivator that you can't make a popular mod by using derivative art.
Sure, sure. I wasn't trying to imply that it's like game over or anything like that. I was just saying that if you, I was thinking more of the example of when it's like the art asset was originally an electrolyzer, but then they took it and they turned it into a something else-alizer. I don't know, whatever. Some completely different building. Then now you're going to have confusion between the two. But at the same time, with something like Nullius, if I'm not mistaken, I have not played Nullius. It's more or less its own experience. Like, it's not really, you're not going to be playing Nullius and Bob's Angels at the same time, so you're not really going to have that kind of confusion.
Right.
But And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I was kind of going. Was I'm not saying don't do the thing, don't have like no art. Just be aware and make decisions appropriately. That's all I was trying to get at. Um, and then as far as collaboration and organization and version control, these are three things that I had to learn with Galdoc manufacturing that I want to share with you. Think about it earlier rather than later. If your idea is expansive and you do get an audience of people who want to help, it's probably good to build in ways for them to onboard. And that's literally what I'm building right now for Hidden Worlds. Like I am building a wiki that has all of my ideas on it, and it's taking a couple of hours a day. I've been working on it, and I'm not even close to done. But when I am done, I'll be able to onboard people. And though this might be too much of an ask to do at the outset, this is something you want to think about such that it can also help you organize your own thoughts, collate them so that your vision is clear, so that when you go to do stuff, you're doing stuff with goals in mind that are specific. You have milestones in front of you that you can try to reach, as opposed to trying to go in all these different directions. Don't over-engineer it for the same reason we don't write over, what's the word or phrase? Don't over-optimized code is the enemy of something. I don't know. Basically, don't do early optimization.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough.
That's a very good. Yeah, there you go. Don't let perfect. So the idea is you're not trying to be perfect here, but just have it in the back of your mind and have some kind of organization there. And with version control, you actually mentioned earlier, which is Git. You don't have to use GitHub. There's other things. You don't have to use Git at all. I think I can't remember the other ones, but there are some competitors out there, and they have like Codeberg, I think is one. These are other version control things that you can use in order to essentially allow you to, rewind the clock in case you've broken something and you need to fix it, or you can branch and try something out and then you can merge them together in this. There is a whole skill with that. If you're making something small, you're probably not going to need the branching features, and more, you're just going to want to be able to rewind the clock when you inevitably break something. But it is something that you would be better to think of, better to address early rather than late. But yeah, those are some of the sort of like things people don't tend to think a whole lot about when they start modding.
I have one more small question on version control. Please. This is much more in the weeds, just logistical. How do you know if it should be and I'll assume a 3-number version system because that's the most common, is like 1.0.0, that type thing. We'll ignore, it's more obvious if you just have a 2-number system. It's like, okay, well, every update increments the second number. And then if you have a massive update, you increment the first number. That's obvious. But when you have 3, I feel like it gets a little more nitty gritty. When do you go from 1.01, 1.02, 1.03 to 1.10, 1.20? And then when you go to 2.00, like, what's your thought on that?
So I have my ethos. You're not wrong to say that there are other ethoses. Ethoses? I don't know. Anyways, the point is that there's different ways to, yeah, right. There's different ways to approach it. Personally, so just so everyone kind of is on the same page, this is like version 1.3.5 or whatever, right? The idea is that almost always the last one is going to be bug fixes and things like that. Small changes that don't really alter anything, but they tweak it a little bit. Maybe you resolved a crash, or maybe you resolved something not existing, or whatever it is, right? You fixed a bug. That's almost always the case. I'll usually use the like 2 digits for that. I think you can do 3. I'm not entirely sure. I've never needed more than 2. I mean, I guess if you're doing something wildly huge and you have tons of bugs, and okay, maybe do a bit more quality control if you need more than 2 digits. The second one I usually do when I'm introducing a new chunk of content. So for me, that second number is when I'm adding something that's like contentful. So maybe I've added a compatibility with Factorio 2, or maybe I've added just a chunk of stuff that modifies the game in some way. It doesn't necessarily break things, but you technically can in this stage. You really want to be careful if you're going to do that. People don't tend to like breaking changes. Like if you update your mod and all of a sudden people's save games are borked in some way, either they can't load, which is the worst case scenario. You do have some tools to help facilitate this, by the way. You do have migration code that can run whenever you go from version to version. So that you do, as the modder, have some control here. But you could also end up with a soft borking. So like, let's say you change a recipe, and now when they load their game, the belts that fed goods to the assemblers that did that recipe no longer have the right goods because you
Right.
changed the recipe.
Yeah,
So this
that's
is
obviously a major version change.
yeah. Well, I mean, you say obviously. I don't know that it is obvious. I think
I guess
people
maybe
do that
not.
and they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
They screw up and they're like, oh crap, what have I done? So you have some things to remedy this. You can use both the mod portal, and if you have a community, and the community that's here with the forums, you've got the discords. You have ways of communicating with people, but please bear in mind one fundamental rule that will always be true: your average user is not going to read a thing you write.
Yeah,
It doesn't
exactly.
matter if you make it the title, they will miss it. It doesn't matter if you have like, I have a tips and tricks thing that explains everything. They will not look. It's not that they're bad. No one's bad here, right? It's because when you're playing a game, this isn't work. I'm not approaching my game. Well, most people aren't approaching the game that they're playing in the same way that they're going to approach I'm learning SQL.
Right.
So
And Factorio is encouraging of updating mods and facilitates it very easily. So it's like it's not like they went to your GitHub to get the update. Like they just
yeah,
hit the button
exactly.
in Factorio and it got updated. So like you should
Yeah.
most frictionless experience for the user is to update and read nothing. So that's what will happen. That's
Yeah.
what they're
They'll
incentivized to do.
when you when you open Factorio and you go to the mod portal and you see update 34, you have 34 mods to update. You click this button. Which ones were they? I challenge anyone listening right now to tell
Exactly.
me the most recent mods that were updated when you click that button. This is the problem. So you have to be very careful with that. What I like to do, I like to put breaking changes or major. So in that, I'm trying to figure exactly how to say this, but basically that first digit captures certainly breaking changes. If I increment like Galdoc's manufacturing from 1 point whatever to 2 point whatever, expect to start a new game with
Yeah,
that
and
mod. If
that's what I was
what I
going to
mean.
say is anything that would break a base or change the inherent functionality of a mod would make sense to change the first number. Like if we're talking about blueprint shotgun, if you changed it to blueprint machine gun and it had a different recipe and it used a different object, then that would be a 2.0. That wouldn't be a 1.2 change.
Blueprint cluster grenade win. Anyways,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
a blueprint artillery. That'll be great.
Oh my gosh. No, no, no. Okay, hold on. Hold on. I saw it in my mind's eye and I want it.
Oh
I
no, what's
want
happened?
I want no bots in the game. I just want a bunch of artillery next to my auto mall and it just builds everything by launching it from the middle of my base with the cannons. And
Artillery
apparently
is on my team.
Code Green says it's on his to-do list. I'm in heaven with that idea. That is so cool.
I agree. Blueprint nuclear explosions just blow up a base into existence. That's perfect.
Oh man. Or okay, hold on. While we're on the, I don't think this works with the way Space Age's platforms are, but like Blueprint orbital bombardment, like ion Blueprint ion cannons, like there's a whole space here. Okay. Anyway, total tangent. All that to say, yeah, just be careful with your versioning. Make sure if you are using the small numbers to increment, it should never be something that would break someone's game. Yeah, I think is
Yeah, and if you do make a soft breaking change in the middle number, that's okay. But just again to recap, the first number is the most important one. Like players incrementing that should expect a new experience. Incrementing the second one, definitely try to avoid breaking changes, or if you can, make them soft. And if you can, make a migration bit of code to help facilitate doing that. And the third one should be bugs. Um, so let's say you have an idea for Wooba because you think that the engine just absolutely needs to be able to render this graphics in certain ways, or you need to be able to make this particular feature. You need something that the game does not currently offer, which there is an entire mod or there's an entire forum page dedicated to API requests. The most common response is go fly a kite, very politely, but politely fly a kite. Basically, no, for some reason. This will end up being something along the lines of it's not performant. We know we've thought of this, but we just can't do it for whatever reason. It would work, but the amount of work it would take to do the thing doesn't justify the reward of having done it. It's not to say your idea isn't valid, but if you ask them to change something that would cost them, like let's say, 3 months of hours to do, but it's only to put in like this one little widget, then they're probably going to say no to that. Vanilla performance cannot be affected at all. Generally, there are times when they will slightly little changes to nudge vanilla performance, but the problem is that there are so many ideas that they have that your idea that slightly alters for the worse vanilla performance when aggregated with all the other ideas that do the same thing amount to a big performance hit. So they are very
Back to
very
that thing I said earlier of like they have to consider, their baseline game
yeah.
is the number one thing, and it's the number one thing financially too, which again, it's like, look, it would be ridiculous if Wooba didn't consider the financial ramifications of these questions. Like, it would be silly for them not to.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's all they're focused on, but it is definitely something that matters. If their base game gets worse for the mega basers who play the base game, then that's a cost. And they already and I will also add, they already made a lot of their own like all of their budget they could spend on making the performance worse, they mostly spent on things they wanted to do for Space Age, right? Like they spent a lot of the anti-performance budget on things they did for Space Age as their own kind of mod. And so
Quality. Oh, sorry.
yeah, so yeah, quality, spoilage, etc. And so to some level, it's like, and that makes sense. That's that they're a company, they're making their game, like that's how they should operate. And in reality, they do so much more for modders than any other company I've ever seen has already. But yeah, all that to say, they're not going to tank the performance of their game to add the thing you want for your mod.
Yeah, and there's at least one dev that I file this into this category, but they are the bouncer who stands at the door and says, "No, you're not coming in here."
Yeah, exactly.
The idea is, I'm not going to say who it is. I'm not calling any names out. I'm not name checking anyone. But that being said, do not let that deter you from making your request. I have made requests that have made it into the game, so it is possible, but they were very, 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 very tiny. And actually, they've all been when they were requesting ideas for, hey, I'm doing this thing already. What do you want to add? And I like one of the only example I can think of is they were talking about different properties that quality could influence. And the thing I added in was, hey, what if the mining radius could be influenced by quality? And they said, sure. So, yay! That's my contribution to the communities. That's the Factorio. When quality is a curse word, yeah. But the thing is that if you want to make a request, here's what you want to do. First, check to see if someone has made the request before. You're going to have to break out your Google Foo on this one because you're going to have to think of all the search terms to sort of rope in as much as you possibly can. A lot of times, it's not a big deal if you request something that has already been requested, because what will end up happening is your thread will get closed with a link to the actual request that was made before you. And sometimes the person who made the original request didn't structure it in such a way that it was easy to find. So this brings me to the next point. Make your request robust. So A, it's easy to find, but B, they know exactly what it is that you want to happen, why it's needed. Give an example of a thing, of it being used. Explain why the, if any, workarounds are inadequate or maybe non-performant. And then you'll have a good chance of being at least considered. That does not mean that you're going to get accepted, but it does mean that you're basically getting as good of a chance to succeed as possible. And so understand that there are a lot of things that go on under the hood in the Factorio engine. For example, revalidating the world after something happens. An event happens that anytime an event happens, there is the potential for a script to basically blow stuff up. And in order for that's because, like I said earlier, you can hook into these events. Like you can take an event, like something happening, the player clicks on something or the player puts down an entity, whatever. You can take that event and then scripts can do basically whatever. They could delete the entire surface.
Yeah.
You put this thing down and then boom, surface gone.
Delete all your assembling machines whenever you build a power pole. Done.
I don't know why you would do this thing. I feel like there's some good cursed mods out there, and people have in fact made some. But because of that, they have to basically revalidate the world anytime events happen, which is costly. And this can influence a lot of the decisions made about whether or not to include another event. That does not mean that there won't be other events added. People have asked for events to occur, to be like, hey, look, can this event be a thing? And then it becomes a thing, because they were able to make their case, and Wuba agreed, and it wasn't that much effort, so to speak. Whatever that much effort is, you know, different from request to request. But the point is that that's the kind of thing that you would, if you read a bunch of these requests, you would kind of get a feeling for. So another piece of advice is literally to go and read a bunch of requests that have been made, even if it's not the idea that you have, because the responses that the team gives can help paint a picture of how likely it is for your request to happen, and also this can both build your expectations for whether or not it's going to get accepted, but also you can say, I understand this may be challenging because of blah blah blah. And it comes across a little better if you're at least cognizant of the fact that you may be asking people to spend months of their time on your idea. But that's just my personal take. So that one is me.
Yeah, I think the important idea there is just come into it with completely open hands and realize that, come into it just assuming it won't happen. Phrase it as humbly as possible. As like, hey, I have this idea. Here's what I think could happen if this were changed this way. And here's why I would like it to be changed this way and why I don't think there's another solution. And if that's possible, awesome. And if it's not possible, I get it. Because there are a million things behind the scenes and under the hood. And again, you could just keep adding to the things we don't see. Not is it just the source code, not is it just the Factorio engine, not is it just what's going on, but it's also like the dev who would need to implement that. How many projects do they already have on their plate? What about how much are they getting paid? And is it worth Wuba's money to get your thing added? Again, they have to. There's so much going on and those are the things we can name. There's ones I literally can't even name because I couldn't even think of them as for reasons they might not do it. So yeah, it's very much, as long as you're open hands and humble about it, you can't really go wrong. And then obviously to have the best chance, like Galdoc was saying, do your research on kind of what the other requests have looked like, what are other things devs have said, and that way you get a little bit of a better shot of phrasing things in a way that help them kind of grasp what you need the quickest and best.
And don't be being humble and being down on yourself are two different things. Don't necessarily go in there hand wringing and, well, I just have a little request or whatever, But at the same time, don't go in there like banging down the doors of a Walmart saying, "Do you know who I am?" That's not gonna work.
Don't do that.
So yeah, let me see, where are we? Oh, and last thing, bear in mind their request queue is already very long. Their plates are already pretty darn full. Like even now, they're working on 2.1, and I don't know where they are in that. I don't know what's planned, but I do know that there has been a chunk of stuff that they wanted in there, and some of it, if there is a workaround, they're not going to do. So,
right.
Like,
and I forgot
ingredients.
I forgot to come back to our bets because we got the Friday facts right after our podcast when we were taking bets on 2.1 and we had talked about our wish lists. It was hilarious because someone left a comment, and I'm sorry I don't have it pulled up, so I don't know your name. I can't credit you, but someone left a comment on the Factory Must Grow on the Krydax Extra channel that was like, "Oh, it's also crazy to me that they haven't done an FFF for a 1 year celebration." And I was like, and this was on Thursday, and I was like, wait, you're right. It's been exactly 1 year since last Friday. I was like, what if they do one tomorrow? And then they did. And I was like, ah. Wild. So I did call that shot, but I don't think my thing of by Christmas is happening based on the way they phrased things in that post. So I think you're probably going to win that part of the bet.
But that's okay. And the fact is that until then, we have lots of stuff to enjoy and content to play.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
because for those who didn't read it, by the way, they announced that it's coming to the Switch 2 or the Switch in the first place. What was the announcement?
No, it's on the Switch. We do have it for the Switch. It's the Switch 2. You're right.
Yeah. And that's like exciting to probably a fairly large subset of people. But for me, it's like a zero factor. So it's like, cool. I'm glad that's happening. Like it makes me happy for the community, but that it literally doesn't matter to me. So because I would never not want to play on a computer. So
yeah, the mouse keyboard.
Yeah.
I play with my Xbox controller. So
ooh, there you go.
No, I don't. That's a joke. Yeah, the last thing I'll just say before we move on is that if the idea that you have is something that has a workaround that you can get there with script reasonably, it's very unlikely that they're going to want to do something because you have a solve. That fungible ingredients is in that category. I found a solve for how to deal with a how to deal with fungible ingredients, which is not perfect, and yet it works. So
Good enough. Yeah.
so you need help making this mod. The Discord is great. We mentioned the forums earlier. The documentation is top notch. These are all things that are resources available to you right now that you could go and just take advantage of.
Yeah, so like
but you
when
had a comment you want to make?
well, yeah, if you're starting out modding, there's different categories here, right? A lot of people that play Factorio are already software developers. They have tons of experience under their belts with developing software, versioning, GitHub, VS Code, pushing, pulling, forking, merging, all of the bop it verbs and adjectives you can think of, and like modding Factorio then to them is more about learning the Factorio specific pieces than anything else. And they're going to have a very different on-ramp to modding Factorio and a very different like cruising altitude when they get there than someone who's new to coding and modding in general.
Those mixed metaphors right there.
Yeah, did you like that? I thought that was fun.
Great.
I know people were driving along and being like, what the hell did he just say? Like on-ramp and cruising altitude? Yes, that is what I said. Anyway, my point is, I did have a few semesters of computer science under my belt, but like I'm not a coder. I've never done software development. And so for me, the on-ramp to modding, there was a big challenge of like, how do I even get these software, like, what do you call it? Your the workspace environment, environment. Yeah. How do I get my modding environment set up and all that? And that was a big part of the challenge. And for those other people I was just talking about, that's already done. They're like, which of my favorite IDEs do I want to use? Anyway. So my point is, don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you're like, I haven't done any of that before, but I have these mod ideas, go start somewhere. And the place to start is with whatever your idea is, and take it to the Factorio mod development discussion and just ask, what do you guys think about this idea? And start having a conversation and see where it goes. And you might get more excited about it. People might glom onto your idea, help you dream and brainstorm, and it'll be great. I do want to point out though, this is a bit of a, I would argue, lack in society at large, but particularly in the software programming, game playing, like mindset. And this factors back to something I think I've even talked about before on the podcast. There's this thing called the XY problem. And it's when it's very common. It's commonly known in software development, but it's just common in life. Someone comes to you and they're saying, I need help with solution Y. I don't know how to make it work. But you, as the more experienced person hearing this person come to you, like, let's say they're like, I need a Band-Aid. And you're like, okay, what do you need a Band-Aid for? And they're like, this gaping bullet hole. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Like, the issue here is not even that, like, Band-Aid's the wrong solution because there's a better solution, but the even better solution is that you shouldn't have gotten shot. Like, what got you shot in the first place? Let's just not get shot. Problem X is that you got shot, and you've turned it into solution Y, which is you need a Band-Aid. And so what happens, though, is the software programming community at large, I'm not saying specific people, but I've experienced this a ton as being the person coming and asking, is they will not tell you how to put on a Band-Aid, and they won't tell you where Band-Aids are sold, and they won't tell you what a Band-Aid is. Instead, they just start saying, you shouldn't want a Band-Aid. Here, let me tell you how to not get shot. And that is rude, and you shouldn't do that if you're the experienced person. The original question always deserves to be answered, even if it may not be the best solution, and even if it may not be a proper solution. Often the person asking is less experienced, and you run into trouble in both cases. So in the case where you are essentially, if you're the experienced person and someone tries to XY problem you and be like, well, you shouldn't want that, here's what you should want instead, then it's just frustrating because you already know, you have the experience, you already know what you want, and you're actually asking exactly what you mean to ask, and the person's trying to tell you you want something different. That's super frustrating because then they just don't even like, you might be more experienced than that. Anyway, so that's obviously frustrating. But if you're the noob who doesn't even know all that, often the thing they're pushing you towards is a more complex and advanced solution that might require you to know a lot of other things you don't know about yet. If you're like, how do I write a script that makes inserters do this every time this thing happens? And you have this specific idea in mind as a noob that's like 3 lines of code and you're trying to write it and you just want to know how to write it. And it might not be perfectly performant. But then someone tries to answer you and says, well, you should actually do this other runtime thing that does this other fancy thing that and hook into this. And you're like, whoa, I just wanted to write 3 lines of code to make this happen. That's how my brain understands it right now. Like, just understand, I'm kind of talking to both crowds. And so to the noob, my recommendation is try to structure your questions clearly and make it clear, like, I know this might not be the way other people would do it. Here's how I'm trying to do it just so I can get my feet in wet in modding and try to understand this. Can you help me accomplish this exact task? And try to phrase your questions so that people can't question the why you want to do it, because people like to question the why you want to do it if they think you're asking for the wrong reasons. The XY problem, I've had it happen so many times in the last 10 years. I play modded games a lot. I talk to people who write the mods a lot, and a lot of people can get kind of rude about like, well, why do you want to do it that way? And you're like, why should it matter? I'm asking a question. Just answer my dang question. And so if you're the experienced person, sorry, so that was for the noob, try to phrase your questions well and be humble about it. Like if your question was, how do I make this performant? Then heck yeah, they're going to answer, you shouldn't want to do it that way. And they'd be correct to answer that way. So the way you phrase is very important. But to the person that's on the helping end, to the experienced people out there, try to be careful when you do see someone ask a question and it seems like they're asking the wrong question. Be sure to if you need to try to push them in a different direction because it does seem like they're missing something that right in front of their face that might help them, try to also answer their original question. Try to be like, here's the answer to your original question. However, I'm not totally sure why you would do it that way when there's this other thing right in front of you that might be more performant. Like, but don't ignore their original question because that just comes off as rude or unhelpful. It's one of the two is my kind of XY problem rant.
The way I usually approach this is that if someone asks a question of that nature, there's a good thing that I get asked when I ask these questions that I've sort of built into my own response, which is, as you say, you answer the question, but you also add in, so what's the problem you're trying to solve? Because a lot of times that one question, because you've come across as polite, will invite them to say, oh, I'm just trying to learn how the structure of this thing works, in which case you just say, okay, yep, there you go, done. I just told you how to do the thing, even though it's not efficient or whatever. You just asked one, you wanted to learn how the thing does, and you're good. If they want to do a specific thing, like take care of a shotgun wound or whatever it is, then yeah, then you say, okay, well, maybe you should consider the ER. That would also be a thing.
Right.
But they've told you the problem that they're trying to solve. So at that point, now you're able to grapple with different approaches rather than attempting to address the approach about which they've asked the question. So yeah, and
yeah, I guess that, yeah, exactly. I think the thought there is just like, don't presume that someone is trying to become an optimized, like efficient, well-versed software programmer. Because I think that's the assumption that I've received a lot of responses of like, well, yeah, if I wanted to learn how to program mods in Factorio super well, you're right. I should go down that road of what you're talking about. But like, I don't. I just want to write this one line and get this thing done. And so your answer was actually you were assuming something onto me that's not true. And therefore, it like, now I have to push back on what you said to even try to get an answer. So it's like, please, my phrase here is the original question always deserves to be answered. Doesn't matter why they asked it. That being said, depending on how they asked it and what you know about the person, it might also be appropriate to potentially point them in some new directions in addition to answering their original question of like, hey, if you're looking to have a performance solution, what you did might not be it. So help me see what you're trying to solve and maybe we can, figure that out.
And don't say, I don't have that problem, and then that's your response. Because you have any idea how many times I've gotten, I don't have that problem. It's like, oh, why did you talk?
Or people that are like, well, why is
Great,
that a
thanks.
problem? And it's like, it doesn't matter why it's a problem. I said it's a problem and I want to fix it. Like, even if the
Yeah,
only reason I wanted it to change was because I don't like it, that alone deserves an answer. Like, it's don't presume you know why people are wondering things or wanting to know things or wanting to change things. It's like, just if you're trying to be helpful or don't say anything. The idea of I'm trying to be helpful by questioning your very question, and that's the only thing I do, that is never helpful. It might be helpful if they've already said they want to be questioned, but that's pretty rare. Anyway, that's my
yeah,
rant. I've experienced a
yep,
lot
that's
of
okay.
internet like frustration being on the source end of that. Like,
Well,
I'm on the noob
actually,
end, and it's something that I think the community isn't that great at. And like, it's something, and that's sort of
I think
okay because that's just how humans are to some level. But also, like, where I can, I want to try to, like, help people understand, like, hey, if your goal is to be helpful, make sure you're careful in how you do that. Like, just saying the first words that come to your brain might not be the best response if your goal is to care about another human.
sure. I do want to say one thing though, and this is to the person who comes with a question. Do understand the Factorio engineer is sorry, the Factorio community is made up of Factorio engineers.
I was going to say that's
And
an appropriate word.
the reason I'm saying that is not because there's anything wrong with engineers being an engineering type myself. The point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes people are very direct, and there have been many times in the community when I have been rewarded for not applying the same social norms I apply to my conversations with like normal conversations, like you're in person with somebody, those sorts of rules to the internet in this case. If someone is being super direct and they're being very curt, this is probably because they are very busy. It's not because they don't care, but they have a lot going on and they're taking time out of their day to answer. This does not mean that people are allowed to just dunk on you or whatever, be mean or whatever. That's not okay. But if someone is being just brief, it it is not necessarily the same sign. It's not a sign of disrespect. I've
Right,
gotten a lot of
right.
very curt answers that are very short, and I've been like, thanks, and that's it.
Yeah,
Because they
and
took time out of their day
don't
to answer
read
it.
tone into internet
That's
messages is a good
yeah.
wisdom.
Um,
Because
and give
yeah,
people forbearance if they are not like I'm not saying people aren't socially adept, they are, but there are definitely times when there are different rules people tend to go by, and they're not born out of malice.
right,
They can be
exactly.
born
In
out of
most
being
cases,
neurospicy. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're whatever. But I mean,
exactly. Yeah, it could be for
let's
any reason that they're phrasing their
yeah,
response the way they are. But
for the
yeah,
exact same reason that you don't want them making assumptions about you, don't make assumptions necessarily about them.
yeah. So the idea is the response, if it is unhelpful, try to let it roll off your back rather than get you entangled into an argument of like, well, you shouldn't be like, yeah, that internet arguments, as someone who's engaged in many of them on purpose, because I apparently like that sort of thing, have rarely been worth my time. Very rarely, like less than 10% of the time. That even might be generous, probably less than 5% of the time. Do they produce anything of value? And often end with, and here's another like personal recommendation, they end with me apologizing. That doesn't happen enough on the internet. When you're rude to
Yeah,
someone else and you are aware, like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have phrased it that way, or I did assume they kind of meant that rudely, when maybe it's like, apologize, say I'm sorry for doing that, that wasn't the way, that wasn't the kind of person I want to be. Thanks for engaging in this conversation with me. Boom. And like, that
yeah,
leaves the water so much more clear if you ever interact with that person again. It leaves the water more clear for anyone that saw you in that conversation with egg on your face. Now they're likely to have a slightly better opinion of you moving forward. So, like, if you're in a community and you are part of one of these ruckuses, which are pretty common, to happen in these communities, like, apologize. Like,
yeah,
you're not, there's something in our culture, and I'm talking Western, culture here, which I know it's different in different parts of the world, but in Western culture, there's something about like being wrong on the internet, or like apologizing is showing weakness and therefore it's bad, or it's admitting that, like if you feel like you're on the right side, which sometimes is true, that somehow apologizing makes you admit you're on the wrong side, and that's not true either. You can apologize for your tone only. You don't have to apologize for the content. If you think the content was actually correct, you can just say, I'm sorry I took that tone, that was inappropriate of me. Thank you guys for having this conversation.
Don't say I'm sorry you were offended, by the way.
Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry you were offended. Okay,
I'm
thanks.
sorry if you overreacted to what I said. It's like, oh
Oh
my
man,
God.
we are
That's
so off the rails.
yeah, we are, but I think this is important
Yeah, no, it's fine.
the more you interact with a Discord modding community, the more of these types of things come up. And I think this is honestly an important part of becoming a good modder is knowing how to interact well in a
Yeah,
way that you come across as nice and
yeah.
caring and the way you want to. And also don't respond, by assuming other people are mad at you when they're just giving a short answer. And so yeah, I think both of those are important. And they're just good life lessons, which honestly, like what's more important than that?
As I say at the end of all of my streams, be kind to yourselves, or be good to yourself, be kind to each other, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's my usual thing.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So all that to say, XY problem, look it up. Make sure if you're asking a question, ask it well, and if you're answering a question, make sure you're actually answering the question on top of whatever
yeah,
else it is you want to say.
and the last thing I'll add to sort of put the train back on the track, as it were,
Thank you.
is that let's say someone did your idea before, so you come up with this great idea for a mod, and Space Age already exists, or whatever. Um, the questions you might ask yourself at this point are there things that they did differently than you could do better or worse? And if it's better, can you do it? And if it's worse, can you learn from it? Because it could be the case that you should still do your own take on this idea. Like if you have an idea for something that you think you could do better, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. You shouldn't just look at something existing and say that's good enough. That being said, you should also ask, can I collaborate with the person who did the idea? So if there is an idea out there, you don't necessarily want to compete. A good example is the align add-ons you can get for Blender. It's not even a Factorio thing. There are a number of competing versions of having different align tools in Blender, which basically it's just somebody that lines things up in the 3D space in various axes and then distributes them in various ways. And there's several tools, and they all compete, and there's no real point. I mean, they're subtle differences, but they all boil down to very, very small differences that don't really justify having made an entire competitor. And so you do want to be aware that you may not need to make your own idea happen, but it can be the case that you might want to collaborate with them, the person who did the original implementation, and say, hey, look, I have a thing. Maybe I could make a PR request, which is to say you take their mod, you make a branch of it, which is essentially your own fresh copy of it, modify it in some way, and then ask them, hey, do you want to incorporate a pull request into your main mod? And talk with them about this process, because it can be the case that you make the thing exist in reality with a much shorter path than if you made the thing from scratch. But
Yeah.
let's say that's not an option.
Oh,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
If that isn't an option, if you really think that your idea is not just like someone has done a version of it, but it's not, you either can't collaborate with them, maybe they're not in the community anymore and it's not open source per se, or whatever reason, is there still something that you can get out of the act of making it? And is there like a joy of creation that you're hoping to get? Are you looking for clout in the community, right? You want to be able to go into the bang open the doors of the Walmart. Do you know who I am? I'm on Factorio.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of.
That's probably not the best motivation. If that's your only
It's
motivation,
not.
I'd personally recommend find a better one.
Yeah. Well, but let's not be unfair, because obviously no one's banging the doors of Walmart. But like, it does feel good to be like, hey, look, I actually know how to do this thing, and I have some social recognition for this. I mean, we are not,
Totally.
we're human beings. We do want to, in some sense, feel some kind of validation from the people around us. I'm not necessarily saying everybody, but I'm just
Yes,
saying it's
that
not
is valid.
invalid.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, there's a healthier version than the Walmart example.
Yeah.
Um,
And with I want to bring back licensing on this too, because there's a lot of different routes it can go. If someone else has made a similar mod, obviously the first idea is, can you collaborate with them, do a PR request, or maybe they can add the feature that you thought of. That's the only difference between your dream and what they've made. And then boom, everyone's happy. Maybe they ask you to add it. But then you get into the, what if they don't want to add it? Well, then maybe they're willing to let you create your own version of the mod and the license is permissive of that. Or maybe if they don't exist or respond, then maybe you can, depending on the license, you might be able to use what they've made, their mod, the literal code of it, as the starting point for your mod. But that, I would say, first you have to triple check the license allows that, and then also as a just general good human thing, triple check that you've tried to communicate with them in every way possible. Are they okay with that? Because you wouldn't,
Yeah.
even if it's technically legal to, stealing someone else's mod as the core for your mod is just bad manners. So don't do that without their permission. But if the license allows and they are impossible to communicate with, then I'd say that's fair game. Because that,
Yeah.
again, it's legal and you tried to communicate with them. So you did everything in your power. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, it's important. There was one time someone had basically asked to incorporate the content, the art content of my mod in a repository that basically roped in a bunch of assets from a bunch of permissive licensed mods. And it was a little shocking to me because it felt like essentially all the stuff that I had made was going to be, there was a vehicle through which the interpersonal, hey, can I use this? And let's have that conversation was about to be taken away because I chose to use a permissive license. And I was very glad they approached me about this. And, there was a sort of a hubbub about it. Someone actually ended up, believe it or not, getting in an argument with me about it. What in the world? But basically, it's, I think, important as a social norm to ask the person if you can use their assets. If they're not around, then yes, go buy the license. I will say that as you said earlier, it is legal. You can just do it. But even if it was illegal, I want people to understand that licenses aren't laws, right? So the license has as much tooth to it as you're willing to then spend on defending it in a court of law. And this does mean that to a certain extent, we really are on the honor system here. And these licenses capture in words the elements of how we should behave in this honor system. But I really feel like that the norms of how we treat each other kindly should carry a bit more weight than some people think when it comes to licenses.
Yes.
So
The
even though
license
the
almost shouldn't matter in terms of how you engage with the other human who made the thing with the license. Is kind of my opinion.
And I mean, there's the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. But the real rule is treat them how they are asking to be treated, because it may be that you're okay with something that they're not.
Whichever one is actually more restrictive of the two. Just like licensing, how you treat others, whichever one is more restrictive is how you should treat them.
It's not the golden rule; it's the golden fall through logic.
Yeah, exactly. It's and not or.
But yeah, once all that's met, then by all means, make your idea. Even if there is someone else who has done it, do keep in mind that if you're going to be, in a sense, I don't say competing, because it's kind of a competition.
Yeah.
Kind of. I don't base success on how many people download my mod. I base success on how happy the people are to have played my mod. That's the same thing with my YouTube videos. I have YouTube videos that got hundreds of thousands of views. And that's great, but I also had more impact with videos that I've made that have hundreds of views, because they came to me and said, hey, Galdoc, I'm now doing art in Blender. Check this out. And I had more so the metric of how do you win in the competition of either YouTube videos or making mods is not just how many people downloaded the mod. That can be a thing that you can try to optimize for, but it also leads you to weird cul-de-sacs and local maximas and things like that. So just be careful.
And like a lot of the stuff we've said, trying to realize there's a tension with all of these things. Like, there's nothing wrong with, there's a mod out there and I kind of wish it did this thing better and I think I could do it better. And I want to make a mod that does it better. And then you make that mod. You're not being rude to the person that made the other one inherently by doing that. Like, that's okay. Like, having two different mod makers competing to make the best version of a thing for us as the users is great. Now, if they're competing in a way that they are angry at each other, or they're saying rude things, or they're literally doing it just to hurt the other person, that sucks. They shouldn't do that. But like, if their whole goal is like, well, person A is trying to make the best mod they can make, person B is trying to make the best mod they can make, but they both compete in the same space, that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
don't be put off by trying to make a mod in the same space as one that already exists. But like Galdoc said, maybe you can just collaborate. But if it feels like what your idea is like a little bit too different than that, then yeah, make it. Go ahead.
And there's also the option of making a mod of the mod. So
yeah,
I'm thinking in this case of like Mad Clowns, which was not part of Bob's Angels, but they said, you know what, we want these other things in there too. And so they made them, and they're just a mod that you can choose to add or not add. That's also a valid option. That tends to apply more to the overhaul side of mods and not like the tiny
right.
nitty gritty Nexala picker mods and things like that. But it's still there. It's still an option.
For sure.
But yeah, that's basically
awesome.
most of my spiels, if you will.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. That was really useful, and I think a lot of this podcast audience is either interested in modding, as in they will do modding, or they at least will be very interested to hear a lot of these kind of behind the scenes on like, how do you think about making a mod? What about, because we've talked about licenses, we've talked about the actual like, what can you and can't you do easily in the engine? We've talked about interaction with Wooba as a modder. We've talked about interactions with each other as modders. I feel like we've hit on kind of a lot of the big pieces here. So thank you a lot for your expertise in all of that.
And I managed not to talk about hidden worlds too much, which is actually a goal I had, because I'm terrified of making declarative statements about that right now.
Well, we can always talk more about that in the future, as always. But yeah, no, I really appreciate all that, and it's been really useful. I myself have kind of in the back of my head some loose ideas for mods, and it's like maybe someday I'll work on those, because I do lack most of the programming skills to do that, but that's where the Discord can be incredibly helpful. And so
that's where Code Green can break into your house and give you programming skill while you sleep.
Santa Green over here is just gonna drop me the 3 lines of code I need, and then I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so now you have to update this mod forever vibe that you were talking about earlier. This is my final tangent, and then we'll wrap up because we need to wrap up. I am the owner of 3 mods, and yes, it is true. When Space Age came out, like, holy crap, I had people knocking down my door to update custom production UI. And the problem is I didn't make the original mod. The original mod was what someone else made. And Ryguard gave me 1 line of code to make custom production UI work properly with like warehouses that had a scroll bar, because currently it wasn't working with scroll bars. And so I added the line of code that Ryguard figured out. And then that was the mod that I re-released because the license was permissive and the person didn't respond to requests. And so then I did that, and now I own that mod. But then Space Age came out, and I'm like, I literally don't even know what this mod is other than this 1 line of code I added to make it work with this thing. But now I own it. And thankfully, people in my Discord helped me update it, and other people submitted pull requests. And now it has more features, and it has a weird little bug when you mouse over a recipe book or a blueprint book. I don't know. But all that to say, don't be scared. Just release the mod. It's great. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Yeah, any final words from you, Galdoc?
I mean, the general thing is that you're playing a game where you make stuff. You're making a factory, and you're using the principles of good software, good design in general, already. So if you are inspired to make a mod, understand that some of the principles that you've learned may in fact already be helping you along the way. They're not direct. You want to be efficient, but like what that looks like in Factorio terms and software terms are slightly different. But don't sell yourself short. If there is an idea that you have, it may be that this is something that you can actually accomplish, and that there is something else out there for you to make that could have an impact on other people's lives. In this case, by making a mod that people would enjoy. But honestly, the world is better for more things being made by the people in it. So I think.
Agreed.
So if you feel that inspiration, and if you're scared or whatever, yeah, maybe try it anyways and see if it's something that sits well with you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but at least you tried. So yeah, that's my encouragement.
Agreed. All right. Well, with that, we will wrap up what might have been the longest episode ever. Congratulations of The Factory Must Grow. And
I was looking at that. I was like, wow.
Yeah, that was my bad. I didn't push us along quick enough.
No, this is good. I think
it was
honestly,
good.
This is probably the natural length that these things want to be, considering the degree to which you and I go on tangents.
It's true. It's true. But yeah, as always, if you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax or Galdoc's Patreon, which we have a link for in the description. Thank you, Galdoc, for hanging out.
Thank you so much for having me. As always, it's been a pleasure.
And yeah, first and third Monday of the month is when we do the podcast. So we should have another one in 2 weeks on December 1st and then again on December 15th to wrap up the year of The Factory Must Grow. As always, if you have any questions, ideas for topics, or guests, please head over to the Krydania Discord and let me know there. Put a link to that in the description. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Always remember, the factory must grow.
Take care.